America in the 1950s, Section 2, with Miss Loshy. Defense spending. As the Cold War continued, the U.S. government continued to spend money in defense industries. This resulted in a spur of technological innovations throughout the following decade. There was also an increase in education programs in math and science in order to keep up with demands for new innovations. If you look at this chart over here to the right, you could see that defense spending dramatically decreased after the 1950s and continued to pretty much go up from there, from 1950 to 1974. Shifting populations. Improvements in water management systems and air conditioning made the Sun Belt more appealing to businesses and people. Jobs in the Rust Belt, or the northeastern part of the United States, were decreasing. After World War II, many factory jobs closed down in the Rust Belt. People and businesses began to move to the Sun Belt in the southern United States. If you look at this map here to the right, the rusty orangish color on the top right in the northeastern part of the United States, that's the Rust Belt. So people are leaving those states. They're moving away from those, and they're moving to the yellow states, or the Sun Belt states. That would be Florida, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Conformity. The 1950s became a period that emphasized conformity. Any unusual activity was regarded with suspicion. The fear of communism also increased the dislike of nonconformists. Nonconformists would be people who didn't want to look and act like everybody else. So when you're conforming, you're looking and acting like everyone else, kind of like assimilating. So that way you're not standing out, you're not looking different. So nonconformists, people who stood out or looked different, were rejected pretty much by society. Beatniks. Beatniks were people who challenged conformity and social norms. They also rejected the consumer society. They smoked cigarettes, wore berets, and wrote poetry. Their movement was called the Beat Movement. Rock and roll. Rock and roll became a popular music genre. It was developed by combining country music with rhythm and blues. Rock and roll helped to further the generation gap between teens and their parents in the 1950s. Elvis Presley was a rock and roll icon during the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s. Teens loved him, but parents hated him. A generation gap is basically when teens believe that their parents don't understand what's going on in the world, and parents don't believe that their teens can understand or comprehend how to function. Juvenile delinquency. Juvenile delinquency became a problem. Experts blamed TV, movies, comic books, racism, busy parents, a rising divorce rate, lack of religion, and anxiety over the military draft for the rise of juvenile crime. Advances in medicine. Many advances in medicine were made after World War II. Antibiotics were used to treat infections and offered hopes for cures. A vaccine was developed for the measles and polio. The first heart transplant was conducted. Streptomycin was discovered. It was an antibiotic that could treat tuberculosis. Tuberculosis was a disease of the lungs that killed thousands of people every year. Polio is a disease that would kill or cripple or paralyze people permanently. Johannes Salk. March of Dimes is a charity that collected donations and helped to fund medical research. Dr. Johannes Salk received funding from the March of Dimes to research a cure for polio. Johannes Salk created the first vaccine to treat polio in 1953. Polio is a disease that attacks the nervous system, causing death or paralysis. Thousands of Americans were paralyzed every year from polio. Children were given doses of the vaccine by placing sugar cubes laced with the medicine on their tongues. And if you remember back from our World War II unit, FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, was afflicted with polio, which caused his paralysis. So that's why he was in the wheelchair. In God We Trust. In God We Trust became the official national motto in 1956. It was created to separate the United States from communist nations that either rejected or restricted religion.